In a small, quiet town where everyone seemed to know each other's business, there lived a young boy named Elijah Johnson. At just 12 years old, Elijah was already making waves in his community, not because he caused trouble or sought attention, but because of his incredible mind and unmatched determination. He attended Maplewood Middle School, a place known for its friendly atmosphere and close-knit student body. But even among the brightest kids at the school, Elijah stood out like a shining star. From an early age, Elijah had shown signs of being special. His parents often joked that he came into the world asking questions. By the time he entered kindergarten, he could already count to 100, recognize shapes most adults couldn't name, and solve simple puzzles faster than anyone else in the room. As he grew older, his love for learning only deepened. Books became his best friends, and numbers were like pieces of a puzzle he couldn't wait to put together. Teachers would often whisper to one another during meetings about how remarkable Elijah was. Some even called him a prodigy, though they weren't sure if such a label fit someone so humble and kind-hearted. Elijah excelled in every subject, but math was where he truly shone. While other students groaned when equations appeared on the board, Elijah's eyes lit up with excitement. Fractions? No problem. Algebra? Piece of cake. Even geometry, which many found intimidating, felt like a fun challenge to him. It wasn't just about getting the right answers. Elijah loved understanding why things worked the way they did. He didn't see math as boring or difficult. It was like a game, and he played it better than anyone else in his class. His classmates admired him too. Whenever someone struggled with homework or needed help studying for a test, Elijah was always willing to lend a hand. He never made anyone feel bad for not knowing something. Instead, he patiently explained concepts until they understood. This kindness earned him respect and friendship from nearly everyone around him. However, not all adults shared the same admiration for Elijah's talents. One person who watched Elijah closely was Mrs. Harper, a veteran teacher at Maplewood Middle School. With over 30 years of experience under her belt, she prided herself on spotting gifted students early in their academic careers. Yet, despite her expertise, something about Elijah bothered her. She couldn't quite put her finger on it at first, but the more she observed him, the more uneasy she became. How could a boy from such a modest background achieve so much? In her mind, success required privilege, access to private tutors, expensive resources, or connections that gave certain students an edge. And Elijah, whose family lived paycheck to paycheck, didn't fit that mold. Mrs. Harper began paying extra attention to Elijah's work. She scrutinized every assignment he turned in, searching for errors or inconsistencies. When she found none, she started questioning his methods. Did he really come up with these solutions on his own? Or was he copying them from somewhere? Her doubts grew stronger after Elijah scored near-perfect marks on several challenging tests. Each time she told herself it was just a coincidence, but deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't long before Mrs. Harper's suspicions turned into outright accusations. During one particularly tough unit on advanced algebra, Elijah solved a problem so elegantly that even some of his classmates gasped in amazement. The solution was creative yet logical, showcasing Elijah's unique way of thinking. But instead of praising him, Mrs. Harper frowned. After class, she pulled him aside and asked bluntly, "How did you figure this out?" Her tone wasn't curious or encouraging. It was cold and accusatory. Elijah blinked, caught off guard by her question. "I just thought about it," he replied honestly. "The steps made sense to me." Mrs. Harper crossed her arms and leaned closer. "Are you sure you didn't get help from someone? Maybe a tutor or a website?" "No, ma'am," Elijah said firmly. "I did it myself." But Mrs. Harper wasn't convinced. To her, Elijah's achievements felt impossible. She couldn't, or perhaps wouldn't, believe that a black boy from a working-class family could possess such extraordinary talent without external assistance. Her bias clouded her judgment, turning what should have been pride in her students' accomplishments into suspicion and distrust. As the days passed, Elijah noticed a change in how Mrs. Harper treated him. She hovered over his desk during exams, glaring at his paper as if waiting for him to slip up. She graded his assignments, more harshly than those of his peers, nitpicking minor details that wouldn't have mattered otherwise. Worst of all, she stopped offering words of encouragement, replacing them with thinly veiled skepticism. It was as if she wanted him to fail, hoping to prove her theory correct. Despite the growing tension, Elijah tried to stay focused. He reminded himself why he loved learning in the first place, not for recognition or approval, but because knowledge brought him joy. Still, Mrs. Harper's behavior weighed heavily on him. For the first time, he began doubting his abilities. Was he really as smart as everyone said? Or was there some truth to Mrs. Harper's accusations? Little did Elijah know, his life was about to take a dramatic turn. What started as a teacher's misguided assumptions would soon spiral into a confrontation that would test his resilience, reveal hidden truths, and ultimately change the course of his future forever. The tension between Elijah and Mrs. Harper continued to grow, simmering beneath the surface like a storm waiting to break. While Elijah tried his best to focus on his studies and ignore her constant scrutiny, it became harder with each passing day. Mrs. Harper's behavior was no longer subtle. It was blatant and unrelenting. She seemed determined to find fault in everything he did, no matter how flawless his work appeared. But what happened next would push things to a breaking point and leave Elijah questioning not only his abilities, but also the fairness of the world around him. One crisp Monday morning, Elijah walked into class feeling confident. Over the weekend, he had spent hours preparing for the statewide math exam, a notoriously challenging test designed for high school juniors, not middle schoolers. The questions were meant to stretch even the brightest minds, requiring critical thinking and problem-solving skills far beyond what most students his age possessed. Yet Elijah had tackled every practice problem with ease, feeling more excited than nervous about the challenge ahead. He knew this was his chance to prove himself, not just to Mrs. Harper but to everyone who doubted him. When the results came back, they confirmed what Elijah already suspected. He had aced the exam. Not only had he scored perfectly on several sections, but he had also solved problems that stumped many older students across the state. His name appeared at the top of the leaderboard, earning him recognition as one of the highest achievers in the region. For anyone else, this would have been a moment of celebration. But for Elijah, it marked the beginning of something far darker. Mrs. Harper didn't congratulate him or acknowledge his success. Instead, she called him to her desk after class, her expression unreadable but her tone sharp. "Elijah," she said, lowering her voice so the other students couldn't hear. "I need to talk to you about your test." Elijah froze, clutching his backpack straps tightly. "What about it, Mrs. Harper?" he asked cautiously. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "You didn't do this alone, did you?" The words hit Elijah like a punch to the gut. He stared at her, stunned. "What do you mean? I studied really hard for this." Mrs. Harper shook her head dismissively. "Come on, Elijah, be honest with me. Did someone give you the answers, maybe a tutor, or maybe you found them online?" "I didn't cheat," Elijah insisted, his voice rising slightly. "I worked really hard for this. Why don't you believe me?" Mrs. Harper sighed, as if she were dealing with a stubborn child. "Elijah, I've been teaching for a long time. I know when something doesn't add up. You're talented, yes, but this..." She gestured toward the test paper on her desk. "This is beyond what any student your age should be able to do without help." Elijah felt anger bubbling inside him, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I didn't cheat," he repeated firmly. "I figured out the problems myself." Mrs. Harper pursed her lips, clearly unconvinced. "We'll see about that," she muttered under her breath before dismissing him. For the rest of the day, Elijah couldn't shake off the weight of Mrs. Harper's accusation. It gnawed at him during lunch, distracted him during gym class, and kept him awake long after he got home that evening. He replayed their conversation over and over in his mind, wondering why she refused to believe him. Was it because of his race? Because of where he came from? Or was there something else, something deeper that made her doubt him? Things escalated quickly the next morning. When Elijah arrived at school, he noticed whispers and sideways glances from some of his classmates. At first, he thought nothing of it. They often teased each other playfully. But then he realized they weren't joking. They were talking about him. Someone must have told them what Mrs. Harper had said. By mid-morning, the rumors spread like wildfire. A few kids started avoiding him while others openly mocked him. "Cheater," one boy called out as Elijah passed by in the hallway. Another rolled her eyes and muttered, "Figures." Even some of his closest friends seemed unsure of what to say, their usual warmth replaced by awkward silence. Elijah felt like the ground beneath him was crumbling. He had always been proud of his achievements, but now they felt tainted. Every compliment he had ever received suddenly seemed hollow, as if people had only praised him because they thought he hadn't earned it fairly. The worst part was knowing that none of this was true. He hadn't cheated, not once. Yet here he was, being treated like a criminal simply because Mrs. Harper refused to accept his brilliance. That afternoon, Mrs. Harper took matters a step further. She called Elijah's parents into a meeting, insisting they discuss a serious issue regarding his recent performance. When Angela Johnson, Elijah's mother, arrived at the school, she immediately sensed something was wrong. Her son sat, slumped in a chair, his head bowed while Mrs. Harper stood beside him with an air of authority. "Mrs. Johnson," Mrs. Harper began, her tone clipped. "I wanted to speak with you about Elijah's recent test scores. While I commend his effort, I'm concerned about how he achieved such results. Frankly, it seems unlikely that he could have done this level of work entirely on his own." Angela blinked, taken aback by the accusation. "Are you saying my son cheated?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. "It's a possibility we can't ignore," Mrs. Harper replied. "I think it's important for us to investigate further. Perhaps Elijah received outside assistance or worse, accessed prohibited materials." Angela turned to look at her son, whose face was pale with frustration and hurt. "Is this true, Elijah?" she asked gently. "No, Mom," he said, tears welling up in his eyes. "I swear I didn't cheat. I worked so hard for this. Why won't anyone believe me?" Angela's heart broke for her son, but she also felt a surge of anger. How dare this woman accuse Elijah without evidence? How dare she dismiss his hard work and talent simply because she couldn't comprehend it? Angela took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. She looked directly at Mrs. Harper and said, "I understand your concerns, but I trust my son. If you have proof of wrongdoing, show it. Otherwise, these accusations are unfair and damaging." Mrs. Harper hesitated, clearly unprepared for Angela's firm response. "I'm just trying to ensure academic integrity," she said defensively. "It's my job to question irregularities. And it's my job to protect my child." Angela shot back. "If you continue down this path, I'll have no choice but to escalate this matter." The room fell silent. Elijah watched as his mother stood tall, her presence commanding respect. For the first time since the accusations began, he felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, someone would finally stand up for him. But the battle was far from over. As Elijah left the meeting with his mother, he couldn't help but wonder how much more he'd have to endure. Would people ever see him for who he truly was? A brilliant, hard-working boy with dreams bigger than anyone realized? Or would prejudice and doubt continue to overshadow his accomplishments? Little did Elijah know, the truth was closer than he thought. Hidden behind the shadows of suspicion lay a story that would not only vindicate him, but also expose the biases festering within the very system meant to nurture young minds. And when that truth came to light, it would change everything. For Elijah, for his family, and for the entire community. Angela Johnson wasn't the type of woman to back down from a fight, especially when it came to protecting her family. From the moment she walked out of that tense meeting with Mrs. Harper, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to end quietly. Her son Elijah had been accused of something he didn't do, and Angela wasn't about to let anyone tarnish his name or crush his spirit. She had seen too many people in their community pushed aside because of prejudice, and she wasn't going to let Elijah become another victim. That evening, after tucking Elijah into bed and ensuring he felt safe despite everything, Angela sat at the kitchen table with a steaming cup of tea. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of the refrigerator. She stared at the stack of papers in front of her, Elijah's test results, notes from teachers, and even old report cards that highlighted his academic excellence over the years. As she flipped through them, she couldn't help but marvel at her son's accomplishments. But mixed with pride was a deep sense of frustration. How could someone look at all of this and still accuse him of cheating? Determined to get answers, Angela decided to dig deeper. The next morning, she called the school principal, Mr. Thompson, and requested a formal review of Elijah's performance. "I want to understand why my son is being singled out," she explained calmly but firmly. "If there's any doubt about his work, I'd like it investigated thoroughly." Mr. Thompson agreed to set up a meeting with the school board, though he warned Angela that the process might take time. Angela didn't care how long it took. She was prepared to see this through until justice was served. While waiting for the review to begin, she started doing some investigating of her own. She reached out to other parents whose children had been in Mrs. Harper's class over the years, asking if they had ever experienced similar issues. What she discovered shocked her. One mother, Lisa Martinez, recounted how her daughter Sophia had once been accused of plagiarizing an essay in Mrs. Harper's English class. According to Lisa, Mrs. Harper had claimed the writing was too advanced for a 7th grader and demanded proof that Sophia had written it herself. After weeks of stress and humiliation, Sophia was eventually cleared when the school found no evidence of wrongdoing. Another parent, James Patel, shared a similar story about his son Arjun, who had been questioned repeatedly about his science fair project, despite having documented every step of his research. Both families were minorities, just like Angela's. These stories painted a troubling picture. It seemed Mrs. Harper had a pattern of targeting students of color, questioning their abilities under the guise of maintaining academic integrity. Armed with this information, Angela felt a renewed sense of purpose. She compiled the testimonies into a folder, adding them to the growing pile of evidence she planned to present during the review. Meanwhile, Elijah struggled to focus on anything besides the accusations hanging over him. At school, the whispers continued, and though some of his classmates tried to support him, the damage had already been done. He began second-guessing himself, wondering if maybe he had done something wrong, even though deep down he knew he hadn't. His grades, which had always been stellar, started slipping slightly as the stress weighed heavily on him. Watching her son's struggle broke Angela's heart, but it also fueled her determination. She vowed to not only clear his name, but to ensure that no child would have to endure what Elijah was going through. As the date of the school board meeting approached, Angela received unexpected support from an unlikely source. Dr. Marcus Reed, a retired mathematics professor who lived in a neighboring town. Dr. Reed had been mentoring Elijah secretly for months through an online scholarship program designed to nurture gifted students. When he heard about the accusations against Elijah, he immediately reached out to Angela. "Mrs. Johnson," Dr. Reed said warmly during their phone call, "I've worked closely with Elijah, and I can assure you he's one of the most talented young minds I've ever encountered. If anyone doubts his abilities, I'd be happy to provide proof." Angela thanked him profusely and asked if he could share any documentation of their sessions. Over the next few days, Dr. Reed sent emails, recorded video clips of their virtual meetings, and even included copies of Elijah's completed assignments, all of which demonstrated his dedication and skill. One particularly striking piece of evidence was a recording of Elijah solving a complex calculus problem live during one of their sessions. The solution was elegant and efficient, leaving no room for doubt about his capabilities. With Dr. Reed's support bolstering her case, Angela felt ready to face the school board. On the day of the meeting, she arrived early, dressed professionally and carrying a thick binder filled with evidence. Inside were Elijah's test scores, teacher evaluations, testimonials from other parents, and Dr. Reed's materials. She also brought along a letter Elijah had written explaining how much he loved math and how hard he had worked to achieve his success. It was heartfelt and sincere, capturing the essence of who he was. When the meeting began, Angela spoke first, laying out her concerns clearly and respectfully. She described Mrs. Harper's behavior, presented the testimonies from other families, and emphasized the emotional toll the accusations had taken on Elijah. Then, she handed over the binder to the board members, urging them to examine its contents carefully. Dr. Reed joined the meeting via video call, speaking passionately about Elijah's potential. "This young man is extraordinary," he said, his voice full of conviction. "He doesn't need shortcuts or assistance. He has raw talent and an insatiable curiosity. To accuse him of cheating is not only unjust but insulting to his intelligence." The school board listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to concern as they reviewed the evidence. By the end of the presentation, it was clear that Angela had made a compelling case. They promised to investigate further and assured her that they took the matter seriously. While waiting for the investigation to conclude, Angela focused on supporting Elijah. She reminded him daily of how proud she was of him and encouraged him to keep believing in himself. Together, they spent evenings working on puzzles and math problems, finding joy in the things that had always brought them closer. Slowly but surely, Elijah began to regain his confidence. Unbeknownst to them, the truth was about to come out in a way that would shock everyone involved and expose the biases that had festered unchecked for far too long. The stage was set for a revelation that would vindicate Elijah, hold Mrs. Harper accountable, and ignite important conversations about fairness and equality in education. For Elijah and his family, the journey ahead would be challenging, but it would also lead to triumph, not just for themselves but for countless others who deserved to be seen and valued for who they truly were. As the school board delved deeper into the investigation, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. What started as a routine review quickly turned into something far more significant, a reckoning that would expose not only Mrs. Harper's actions but also the systemic issues lurking beneath the surface of Maplewood Middle School. The evidence Angela Johnson and Dr. Marcus Reed had gathered was overwhelming, leaving little room for doubt about Elijah's innocence. But what truly shocked everyone was the extent of Mrs. Harper's bias and how long it had gone unchecked. The turning point came when the school board decided to interview past and present students who had been in Mrs. Harper's classes. First, some were hesitant to speak up, fearing retaliation or believing their voices wouldn't matter. But once they saw how seriously the board was taking the case, more and more students came forward with stories eerily similar to Elijah's. One after another, they described moments when Mrs. Harper had questioned their abilities, dismissed their achievements, or outright accused them of dishonesty, all without any concrete evidence. Take Maya Thompson, for example, a bright 8th grader who had recently won second place in a regional science fair. According to Maya, Mrs. Harper had pulled her aside after the competition and asked if her parents had helped her design the project. "She made me feel like I couldn't have done it on my own," Maya recalled during her testimony. "Like, being black meant I needed someone else to do the hard work for me." Then there was Jamal Rodriguez, a former student who now attended high school. Jamal remembered how Mrs. Harper had singled him out during a group project, insisting he hadn't contributed equally despite his teammates vouching for him. "It felt like she was watching me extra closely, waiting for me to mess up," he said. "But no matter how hard I worked, it never seemed good enough for her." These testimonies painted a disturbing pattern. It wasn't just Elijah who had faced unfair treatment. It was a recurring issue that affected multiple minority students over the years. While some had shrugged it off as part of life, others admitted they had internalized the doubts planted by Mrs. Harper, questioning their own potential long after leaving her class. Meanwhile, Dr. Marcus Reed continued to play a pivotal role in uncovering the truth. During a follow-up meeting with the school board, he shared detailed records of his mentorship with Elijah, including emails, assignments, and video clips of their sessions. One particularly powerful piece of evidence was a recording from a live problem-solving workshop hosted by a prestigious university. In the video, Elijah could be seen collaborating with other gifted students from across the country, tackling advanced mathematical concepts with ease. His solutions were innovative and precise, earning praise from both peers and instructors. Dr. Reed explained that Elijah had been invited to participate in these workshops based on his exceptional performance in national math competitions. This isn't just raw talent, Dr. Reed emphasized. Elijah has put in countless hours of effort, honing his skills and pushing himself beyond what most students his age are capable of achieving. To suggest otherwise is not only incorrect, but deeply disrespectful. The school board members listened intently, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief as the scope of Mrs. Harper's misconduct became clear. They reviewed every document, watched every video, and cross-referenced each account against Elijah's academic record. By the end of the process, there was no denying the truth. Elijah Johnson was exactly who he claimed to be, a brilliant, hardworking student whose accomplishments were entirely his own. When confronted with the mounting evidence, Mrs. Harper initially tried to defend herself. She argued that her suspicions stemmed from a desire to maintain academic integrity, not from personal bias. But as the testimonies mounted and inconsistencies in her explanations emerged, her defenses crumbled. Faced with undeniable proof of her discriminatory behavior, she had no choice but to admit her mistakes or at least acknowledge that her actions had caused harm. The fallout was swift and severe. The school board suspended Mrs. Harper pending further disciplinary action, citing her repeated failure to uphold professional standards and treat all students fairly. News of her suspension spread quickly through the community, sparking heated discussions about racism and inequality in education. Some parents praised the decision, calling it a necessary step toward accountability. Others, however, defended Mrs. Harper, arguing that she had simply been doing her job. The divide highlighted just how deeply entrenched these issues were, and how much work still needed to be done. For Elijah, the vindication brought a mix of relief and sadness. On one hand, he was grateful that the truth had finally come to light. Knowing that people believed in him restored some of the confidence Mrs. Harper's accusations had shaken. On the other hand, the ordeal had left scars that wouldn't fade overnight. He still struggled with self-doubt, wondering if others would ever see him as more than the kid who had been accused of cheating. Despite this, he remained determined to rise above the negativity and continue pursuing his dreams. Angela Johnson, meanwhile, channeled her energy into advocating for change. She joined forces with other concerned parents to push for reforms within the school district, including mandatory training on implicit bias for all staff members. Together, they formed a committee dedicated to creating a safer, more inclusive environment for students of all backgrounds. Their efforts gained traction, drawing support from teachers, administrators, and even local leaders. As news of Elijah's story spread beyond the town, it captured the attention of media outlets and organizations focused on educational equity. Articles were written, interviews were conducted, and soon Elijah found himself in the spotlight, not as a victim, but as a symbol of resilience and excellence. Scholarships poured in from universities eager to support his future endeavors, while invitations to prestigious summer programs arrived almost daily. For the first time in weeks, Elijah allowed himself to dream big, to imagine a future where his talents could shine without fear of judgment or prejudice. But perhaps the most profound impact of all was the ripple effect Elijah's story created. Inspired by his courage, other students began speaking out about their own experiences with bias and discrimination. Conversations that had long been avoided were suddenly happening openly, challenging the status quo and paving the way for meaningful progress. Teachers and administrators took note, realizing the importance of fostering an environment where every child felt valued and empowered to succeed. Through it all, Elijah remained humble, grounded by the love and support of his family. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but he also knew he wasn't alone. With his mother by his side, Dr. Reed cheering him on, and a community rallying behind him, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The truth had set him free, and in doing so it had ignited a movement that promised to transform lives far beyond his own. Little did Elijah know, this was only the beginning. As the dust settled and the initial shock wore off, new opportunities awaited him. opportunities that would test his strength, deepen his resolve, and ultimately shape the person he was destined to become. And though the scars of the past would always linger, they would serve as a reminder of how far he had come and how much farther he could go. In the weeks and months that followed the exposure of Mrs. Harper's misconduct, Elijah Johnson's life transformed in ways he never could have imagined. What had started as a painful ordeal became a catalyst for growth, not just for him, but for his entire community. The truth about his brilliance and integrity had not only cleared his name, but also sparked a movement that reached far beyond Maplewood Middle School. For Elijah, this newfound attention brought both challenges and opportunities, shaping him into a young man who was determined to use his voice and talents to inspire others. The first major change came when Elijah received an invitation to attend a prestigious summer math camp hosted by one of the country's top universities. It was a program designed for students who showed exceptional promise in mathematics, offering them access to cutting-edge research, mentorship from renowned professors, and connections with peers who shared their passion. At first, Elijah hesitated. The thought of leaving home and stepping into such an elite environment felt overwhelming. But Angela, his ever-supportive mother, encouraged him to take the leap. "This is your chance to shine," she told him. "You've worked so hard for this moment, don't let fear hold you back." With her words echoing in his mind, Elijah packed his bags and boarded a plane for the first time in his life. When he arrived at the university campus, he was awestruck by its sprawling grounds, state-of-the-art facilities, and the sense of possibility that hung in the air. Over the course of the summer, he immersed himself in advanced coursework, collaborative projects, and hands-on experiments that pushed the boundaries of what he thought possible. For the first time, he found himself surrounded by people who didn't question his abilities, they celebrated them. The experience reignited his love for learning and reinforced his belief that he belonged among the best. But it wasn't just academics that defined Elijah's journey during those months. He also formed deep friendships with fellow participants, many of whom came from diverse backgrounds and faced similar struggles in their own lives. Late-night conversations in dorm rooms turned into heartfelt discussions about identity, resilience, and the importance of representation in fields dominated by privilege. These bonds reminded Elijah that he wasn't alone, and that together they could break barriers that had long stood in their way. Back home, the ripple effects of Elijah's story continued to unfold. Inspired by his courage, other students began speaking out about their experiences with bias and discrimination. Parents, teachers, and community leaders joined forces to create initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity and equity within the school system. Workshops were organized to educate staff on recognizing implicit biases, while student-led groups advocated for policies that ensured every child felt valued and supported. Slowly but surely, Maplewood Middle School and the broader district started to change. Mrs. Harper's suspension served as a wake-up call for the school board, prompting them to implement stricter oversight and accountability measures. Teachers underwent mandatory training sessions focused on cultural competency and fairness in education. New guidelines were introduced to prevent unfounded accusations like the ones Elijah had faced, ensuring that all students were treated with respect and dignity. While these changes wouldn't erase years of harm overnight, they marked a crucial step toward healing and progress. For Elijah, returning to school after the summer camp felt different. The whispers and sideways glances that had once haunted him were replaced by genuine admiration and respect. His classmates now saw him not as someone tainted by controversy, but as a role model, a reminder that talent and hard work could overcome even the most unjust obstacles. Even some of the teachers who had previously doubted him approached him with apologies and renewed support. One of the most touching moments came during a school assembly held to honor Elijah's achievements. Standing before a packed auditorium, Elijah delivered a speech that left everyone in tears. "I'm here today because I refuse to give up," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. "But I'm also here because of the people who believed in me when others didn't, the ones who stood beside me and fought for what was right. This isn't just my victory, it's ours. And if we keep working together, we can make sure no one else has to go through what I did." His words, resonated deeply, earning a standing ovation from students, teachers, and parents alike. That day, Elijah realized something profound. His story wasn't just about him anymore. It had become a beacon of hope for anyone who had ever been underestimated or dismissed. He decided then and there that he wanted to dedicate his life to helping others unlock their potential, just as Dr. Marcus Reed had done for him. As the years passed, Elijah's determination paid off in remarkable ways. He graduated at the top of his class, earning scholarships to several prestigious universities. Eventually, he chose to study mathematics at a renowned institution, where he continued to excel. Beyond academics, he became actively involved in mentoring programs, volunteering his time to tutor underprivileged students and advocate for educational reform. His efforts earned him recognition not only as a brilliant mathematician, but also as a compassionate leader committed to making a difference. Dr. Marcus Reed remained a constant source of guidance throughout Elijah's journey. Their bond grew stronger over the years, evolving from mentor-mentee to something akin to family. When Elijah graduated college with honors, Dr. Reed was there in the audience, cheering louder than anyone else. "You've always had greatness inside you," Dr. Reed told him afterward. "All I did was help you see it." Elijah's impact extended far beyond his immediate circle. His story inspired countless individuals across the country, sparking conversations about the need for diversity and inclusion in STEM fields. Schools and organizations began implementing programs modeled after the initiatives started in Maplewood, creating pathways for marginalized students to thrive. Elijah often received letters from young people thanking him for showing them that they too could achieve greatness, regardless of where they came from or what challenges they faced. Looking back on everything he had been through, Elijah couldn't help but feel grateful. Yes, the road had been difficult, and yes, there were moments when he doubted himself. But every challenge had shaped him into the person he was today, a resilient, compassionate, and driven individual who refused to let adversity define him. He knew that while the scars of the past would always remain, they were a testament to his strength and perseverance. Years later, as Elijah stood on stage accepting an award for his contributions to education, he reflected on how far he had come. From a small town where he had once been accused of cheating to a world stage where he was celebrated for his brilliance, his journey was proof that the truth, when pursued relentlessly, always finds its way to light. And though he had achieved more than he ever dreamed possible, he knew his work was far from over. There were still battles to fight, voices to amplify, and dreams to nurture. As he gazed out at the crowd, Elijah smiled. He thought of his mother, whose unwavering love and determination had carried him through the darkest days. He thought of Dr. Reed, whose belief in him had opened doors he never knew existed. And he thought of all the young minds waiting to be inspired, ready to rise above the limitations placed upon them. In that moment, Elijah realized that his story wasn't just about triumph, it was about legacy, and he was just getting started.